Boston, Massachusetts. Spring 2009. A city of universities, of ambition, of futures being built. Somewhere in that city, a young man is preparing for the day. He is 22 years old. He is studying medicine. He is engaged to be married. To every person who knows him, he is ordinary, focused, quiet, polite. But there is something else, something that does not show up in his exam scores, something that does not surface at the dinner table, something that lives hidden behind a screen. On April 14th, 2009, a woman named Julissa Brisman is found in a Boston hotel room. She has been shot. She does not survive. Within 6 days, investigators will have a name. Within a week, they will have an arrest. And the man they arrest will not look like what anyone expected. He will look like a future doctor. He will look like a neighbor. He will look like someone you trust. This is the story of Philip Markoff, a man who lived 2 lives until the second one caught up with him. To understand this case, you have to start at the beginning, not with the crime, with the person. Philip Markoff was born in 1986 in Sherrill, New York. He grew up in a small town. By most accounts, a normal childhood. He was athletic. He played sports. He did well in school. In many ways, he was exactly who you would want your child to become. He attended the State University of New York at Albany. He studied biology. He was accepted into Boston University School of Medicine, a competitive program, a selective school. Getting in required more than average grades. It required drive. By 2009, Markoff was a second-year medical student. He was 22 years old. He was engaged to a woman named Megan McAllister. She had known him for years. To her, and to everyone around them, he was reliable, stable, trustworthy. His classmates described him as quiet but approachable. His professors knew him as a capable student. His neighbors had no complaints. There were no red flags in his record, no prior arrests, no known history of violence. On the surface, nothing. But that is the thing about a double life. It is by design invisible. In 2009, Craigslist was one of the most visited websites in the United States. It was a classifieds platform, a digital bulletin board. People used it to sell furniture, find apartments, post job listings. But Craigslist also had a section for adult services. It was controversial. It was loosely monitored, and it was used by people advertising escort and massage services. These were individuals operating outside formal employment. They worked alone. They met clients in hotels, locations that were unfamiliar, temporary, and critically private. They were in many ways isolated. And someone around early 2009 had noticed that. Someone had looked at those listings and seen an opportunity, not for companionship, for something far more calculated. What followed was a pattern, methodical, repeated, escalating, the same approach, the same method, different women, different hotels, the same man. In the weeks leading up to April 2009, a series of incidents were beginning to take shape, though no one had connected them yet. A woman advertising massage services on Craigslist received a message from a potential client. The message was polite, professional. A meeting was arranged. A hotel was chosen. The man who arrived appeared calm. He did not raise any immediate alarm. And then, the situation changed. He produced a firearm. He demanded money and valuables. He left quickly. He left behind a shaken victim and almost no trace. This was not a spontaneous act. It was organized. He used fake names in his communications. He used phones that were difficult to trace. He targeted women who were unlikely to immediately involve law enforcement. He chose hotel rooms, neutral ground, anonymous, temporary. Each element of the approach had been considered, not by accident, by design. This was someone who understood how to minimize exposure. And for a time, it worked. First known incident, Tricia Leffler. One of the first documented incidents involved a woman named Tricia Leffler. She had advertised services on Craigslist. She received an inquiry. She agreed to meet. The meeting took place at a Boston hotel. The man who arrived produced a weapon. He bound her hands. He took her cash and belongings. and then he left. Leffler survived. She later provided a description to investigators. A young man, tall, light features, calm demeanor. At the time, the full significance of that description was not yet clear. It would be soon, a pattern taking shape. Law enforcement would later identify a series of incidents connected by method. Each one followed a recognizable sequence. Contact through an online listing, an arranged meeting at an upscale hotel, a confrontation, weapon drawn, a robbery, a departure, no prolonged confrontation, no unnecessary conversation. Efficient, clinical. These were not impulsive acts. They were rehearsed. And with each incident, the perpetrator became slightly more confident, or perhaps slightly less careful. Because on April 14th, something changed. What had been robbery became something else entirely. Julissa Brisman was 25 years old. She was from New York. She was described by those who knew her as warm, ambitious, and full of life. She was in Boston on the night of April 14th, 2009. She had arranged to meet a client through Craigslist. The meeting was set for the Marriott Copley Place Hotel, a well-known property in the Back Bay neighborhood. What happened inside that room, in the minutes that followed, resulted in her death. Brisman was shot multiple times. She was found by hotel staff. Emergency responders were called. She was transported to a nearby hospital. She did not survive. Her death marked a critical turning point. What had been a series of robberies, serious but survivable, was now a homicide investigation. Boston police were now looking for a killer. Why this case mattered beyond the headlines. There's a question that often goes unspoken in cases like this. Not just who did this, but why did it escalate? The previous robberies had been controlled. The perpetrator had left. On the night of April 14th, that did not happen. Investigators would later suggest that a struggle occurred, but the situation did not go as planned. That Brisman resisted. What is known as this? She was harmed. She died. And the man who met her that night walked out of that hotel and returned to his life. For approximately 6 days, he was free. He attended classes. He may have been with his fiancée. He went through the ordinary motions of an ordinary life, all while investigators were closing in. When police began reviewing evidence from the Marriott Copley Place, they did not have a name. They had fragments. But fragments, when examined carefully, can become a case. The first major tool was surveillance footage. Hotels of that caliber maintain extensive camera systems. Lobby entrances, elevator banks, corridor approaches. Every movement through a building like that is, in some form, recorded. Investigators reviewed the footage from the night of April 14th. They identified a figure, a man entering the hotel, moving toward the corridor where Brisman's room was located. The image was not a confession, but it was a thread, and investigators began to pull. Digital trails. While the surveillance footage provided a visual, the digital evidence told a fuller story. Investigators subpoenaed communication records related to the Craigslist listings, messages sent before the meeting, accounts used to make contact, IP addresses, email headers, timestamps. Online communications rarely disappear entirely. They leave traces in servers, in metadata, in records held by service providers. When investigators followed those traces, they began to converge on a single individual. The email communications led back to an account. The account led back to an IP address. The IP address led back to a physical location. That location was linked to Philip Markoff, a medical student at Boston University, living in an apartment in Quincy, Massachusetts. Engaged, quiet, by all appearances, unremarkable. Connecting the incidents. As investigators focused on Markoff, they also revisited earlier incidents. The robbery of Tricia Leffler, weeks prior. The description she had given. Tall, young, calm. That description aligned with the figure in the surveillance footage. It aligned with Philip Markoff. Phone records were examined. Communications were cross-referenced. The The same patterns, the same approach, the same method appeared across multiple incidents. What had appeared to be isolated events were not isolated at all. They were connected. They were connected to one man. By April 20th, 6 days after Julissa Brisman's murder, investigators were ready to act. On the morning of April 20th, 2009, law enforcement approached a vehicle on the highway outside Boston. Philip Markoff was inside. He did not resist. He was taken into custody without incident. There were no dramatic confrontations, no chase, no standoff, just a man who had been living a double life, being led away. When Philip Markoff's identity was made public, the reaction was one of genuine disbelief. Photographs circulated showing a clean-cut, well-dressed young man, a future doctor, an engaged fiancé, a student. His fiancée, Megan McAllister, initially and publicly defended him. She maintained that she knew him, that this could not be who he truly was. It was a response that many people understood, because the image did not fit the crime. And yet, the evidence said otherwise. Markoff was charged with murder, armed robbery, and kidnapping. He was held without bail, and a trial, at some point, seemed inevitable. It was not. Philip Markoff spent the following months in custody at the Nashua Street Jail in Boston. His legal proceedings moved slowly. His defense team worked to challenge the evidence. A trial date was in the process of being established, but there were signs that something was deteriorating. In August 2009, 4 months after his arrest, Markoff made an attempt on his own life while in custody. He was discovered. He survived. He was placed under closer supervision. His fiancée, Megan McAllister, had by that point ended the engagement. She had released a brief statement, and then she stepped away from the public eye entirely. August 15th, 2010. On August 15th, 2010, the 1-year anniversary of what would have been his wedding day, Philip Markoff was found dead in his jail cell. He was 23 years old. His death was ruled as suicide. There would be no trial, no testimony under oath, no cross-examination, no courtroom moment where the full picture, whatever it was, could be laid out in front of a jury. The case, in a legal sense, was closed. But the questions it raised about motive, about identity, about what drives a person to live one life while concealing another, those questions did not close with it. The question of motive. Criminal investigators and psychologists who reviewed the case publicly noted an unusual feature. Philip Markoff did not appear to be in desperate financial need. He was not living in poverty. He had student loan debt, as many medical students do, but nothing that on the surface explained what he did. The robberies were real. The items taken had some value, but the amounts were not extraordinary. Some observers suggested that the act itself, the power, the control, the concealment, may have been part of the motivation. That the value was not only in the money taken, but in the life being lived in secret. We do not know. Markoff left no detailed written explanation. He gave no formal statement. He went to his death without publicly explaining why. That absence of explanation is one of the most enduring aspects of this case. There are several layers to this case that continue to be discussed, not just in the context of criminology, but in wider conversations about identity, technology, and human behavior. The internet as a tool. The role of the internet in this case is significant. Craigslist, in 2009, operated as a largely anonymous platform. Users could contact strangers without revealing who they were. They could arrange meetings, move through the world digitally, and then physically with minimal accountability. What Markoff understood and exploited was the assumption of anonymity. He believed that operating online would protect him, that the digital veil would hold. It did not, because the same technology that allowed him to make contact also recorded every step he took. The IP addresses, the email headers, the timestamps. Every digital action left evidence. In the years since this case, platforms like Craigslist have significantly changed or removed their adult services sections, in part due to cases like this one. The conversation about safety and accountability on online platforms did not start here. But this case gave it a new and sharper focus. The speed of the investigation. 6 days. That is how long it took from the murder of Julissa Brisman to the arrest of Philip Markoff. It is a remarkable timeline. Not because investigations are always that swift, they are not, but because it illustrates what becomes possible when digital evidence is preserved, when surveillance systems are functioning, and when investigators move with both urgency and precision. Small pieces, a hotel camera, an IP address, a phone record, assembled into a case. Not dramatically, not through a single breakthrough moment, through careful, methodical work. The absence of closure. The death of Philip Markoff before trial is one of the most discussed aspects of this case. For investigators, years of work that would never be tested in a courtroom. For Julissa Brisman's family, no verdict, no formal reckoning, no public accounting for what was done. For the other victims, no testimony, no formal acknowledgement of their experiences within a trial setting. Closure, in criminal cases, is never complete. But a trial, whatever its outcome, provides structure. It provides record, testimony, public record. In this case, that structure was never built. The questions remain open. The answers, if Markoff ever had them, went with him. Philip Markoff was, by every visible measure, a person moving towards something. A degree, a career, a life. What was happening beneath that surface, what need or impulse or fracture, remains unclear. What's clear is this. Julissa Brisman was 25 years old. She had a life ahead of her. And on the night of April 14th, 2009, that life ended in a hotel corridor in Boston because someone chose to do what he did. The most unsettling truth about this case is not the violence. It is the ordinariness of the person behind it. The way a life can be divided, visible and hidden, and how long the hidden part can survive before the truth surfaces. It always does. This has been the Craigslist Killer, the double life of Philip Markoff. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and share for more true crime stories.